Okay, I'm not going to make this one too long because there is, I'm running out of space. Just very brief word before getting to the main video. Just seen a BBC report on a young doctor in Beirut who is giving free surgery to victims of explosion. A young woman has bad facial scarring, and he's giving this free surgery. So I think it's just a reminder that medics really, if there was a collective Nobel Peace Prize, and it tends to be awarded to organizations or individuals, but I think if there was a collective Nobel Peace Prize for a profession, then the world's medics should get it this year, unquestionably. Um, it's really a reminder of how great these people are. And they're almost universally humble. Like they wouldn't say they're heroes or anything. They would say they're doing the job. But this young doctor is given free surgery, just out of human compassion. So a lot of respect for that. Okay, this is a bit of a spontaneous video, but I think it's just something I want to say because at some point I'm going to be really, really looking at this channel, and I may be deleting and editing videos. I don't know yet, but I want this to be out there, and it's about third wave feminism. Now, if you consider yourself a feminist, particularly if you're a woman, I would ask you to just hear me out. If you disagree, that's okay. I'll leave the comment section open. You can say that, whatever, but please just hear me out. Um, Firstly, to clarify, I don't consider myself a masculist. That is to say, I believe in men's rights, absolutely, and I believe that there's areas that do disproportionately impact men, things we really need to look at. Um, the issue around male suicides has been gradually getting more attention, which is a good thing. It needs to get more attention. And there's areas that disproportionately impact men. And no, I'm not blaming feminism for that. I'm just saying that's a fact. Um, there are a lot of areas I think there are double standards in what feminists preach. For a particular one is in the equality mantra. If you're going to say that your whole focus is about equality, then you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. And one of my main criticisms of third wave feminism is that it isn't. For example, feminists will really, really raise a big issue about the gender pay gap in executive boards and that sort of thing. Although I have to say, every job I've ever done, my female colleagues got paid exactly the same. But they'll really make a huge issue out of that. But when it comes to judicial sentencing, in cases where defendants get a lighter sentence, literally because they are women, and I'll give a recent example. There's a young woman from Greater Manchester. She got blind drunk at 30,000 feet. She assaulted airline staff. She really made herself completely obnoxious to fellow passengers, to crew. Um, and when it came to trial, the judge ruled that she didn't need to go to jail because she was a single mother. Now, my question is, would that be the same judgment if the defendant was a single father? Surely it's the same principle. Surely the child has their parent in jail. Um, so issues like that, feminists are silent about. I've brought this issue up before, and one of my feminist contacts were no longer connected, as I just found her impossible to reason with. But she had this idea that, oh well, feminists never, they never say women shouldn't go to jail. Okay, but at least acknowledge there are double standards. You see, I think feminists don't really grasp that there are areas like this that a lot of people look at, a lot of men look at, and they say, well, wait a second, where's the fairness there? So if your whole mantra is about equality, then if you're only coming from one side, if you're only saying we demand equality for women, but you're not acknowledging that there are areas where men aren't treated fairly, then as far as I'm concerned, you're not going to meet me middle halfway. you know? Um, because as a man, I acknowledge there's issues that impact women. I do. There are issues that impact women that don't impact men. And I would say right now, for example, I'm very sympathetic to feminists who are being denounced by the trans movement. We've seen this, an example being J.K. Rowling, but there's others. There's a woman MP, Labour MP from Canterbury, um, and the Archbishop has just stepped in to defend her because she liked a tweet by Piers Morgan questioning a CNN report that said people with cervixes, well, obviously only biological women have cervixes. So I do sympathise with feminists who are getting attacked by certain aspects of the trans lobby because they're calling for common sense. That's an area I agree with feminists on. I think that they're because it's undeniable there is this schism emerging between feminist so-called TERFs, which I think stands for I forget the term, but it's a derogatory term for women who insist that biology matters. Um, and the trans lobbies say they're transphobes and they're haters and they're. But I have to say that I see no comparison between a little bit of sarcasm or liking a tweet versus a woman getting rape threats. So in that area, I'm very sympathetic to women, by which I mean biological women. Um, but here's the thing: there are some men, and I don't entirely agree with this, but I know where they're coming from, who say they've no sympathy for feminists in this situation because it's only the way that feminists have been treating men for years. In other words, obviously feminists aren't threatening rape, but they have been shaming men for years. That's irrefutable. Okay, I defy any feminist to say that hasn't been the case. Um, so some men kind of take the attitude, well, okay, now feminists are getting a dose of their own medicine. They've been shaming men for years, and now trans activists are shaming them. But this gets into actually a wider issue. When you put people on this, when you pigeonhole people in such a way, I'm not talking about a strong difference of opinion or even the odd insult. I'm talking about when you absolutely put them in like you just demonize them, then how can there be any middle ground? It isn't just about demonizing people, it's also about putting them in a position whereby every word they say, you are going to read something into that in a negative way. For example, there are some feminists out there, if men disagree with them or if they debate them, their attitude is the man's talking down to them. Now, how can you expect men to have dialogue if you're always going to say that they're talking down to you? Get some self confidence because I really think that sort of sensitivity it becomes very, very tiring for other people because they're constantly thinking, well, I'm walking on eggshells here. Now, I'm not saying there aren't pompous men. I'm not saying there aren't arrogant men out there. There's also arrogant women and pompous women, by the way. I've been patronized by women. I didn't particularly like it, but I didn't take the attitude, oh, well, it's only because I'm a man. I took the attitude, well, she's just an obnoxious person, okay? Not woman, not like she is that way because she's a woman. She did happen to be a feminist, though. So I just think that feminists need to accept that if they're pushing this narrative that women have a hard time, we live in an overbearing patriarchy, and men have all the power, which is not true in Western societies. It really isn't. Um, if that is the narrative, then my simple question would be, what do you want from men? Do you want men to be allies, as Emma Watson called for? And I kind of saw that whole he for she thing as kind of the polite face of feminism. Watson was quite diplomatic. She wasn't denouncing men, she was quite accommodating. But ultimately, the message was not an egalitarian one. It was he for she, not he and she. It's very important. Um, I understand there's differences between the genders. So, for example, between the sexes, I should say. So, for example, there are certain things that I could do to a man that I wouldn't do to a woman because I'm old fashioned enough to believe in that. For example, I would never punch a woman in the face. That's alien to me. And I'm not saying I would punch a man in the face just like that, but if I had to, I would. I think the only time that male aggression towards women could ever be even close to being justified would be to protect children. For example, if you have an abusive mother and the father needs to protect his children, that's a circumstance where I think most people would sympathize with the father. Or maybe protecting a more vulnerable woman. I remember seeing a case somewhere in the United States of this guy. It was in one of the big cities. It might have been Chicago or somewhere like that. Anyway, this girl gang attacked his daughter. Now, his daughter wasn't involved in gangs. This bunch of thuggets attacked his daughter. Now, he stepped up and he physically fought them off as best he could. Now, is anyone going to denounce that man for hitting girls? I do somewhat take the view if women demand to be treated like men in that way physically, they can't, people can't shame a man if he is put into that sort of situation. And some men are very much, they get a bit sanctimonious about this, and some women get very, I think, I abhor violence against women. I think there are thugs around this world too. Their football team loses and they beat up their girlfriend. And there is control and coercive relationships both ways. So, as a general principle, I think violence against women is repugnant. I can't even begin to understand the mindset of a man who thinks it's okay to brutalize a woman. But by the same token, I think that feminists have to answer to the fact, or at least acknowledge the fact, there are violent women as well, and they can't have double standards on that. Um, But what I would conclude with this is if you're a self described feminist, you probably don't agree with everything I'm saying. You probably disagree with a good deal of it. But I implore you, next time you're in a debate with a man, I know the dynamic's different online, but let's say face to face. Um, you can disagree with him, you can challenge him, but don't assume that everything he is saying is because you are a woman. When you start to have that mentality, it's a bit like the race issue, isn't it? Oh, it's because I'm black or because I'm white or whatever it is. When people start to get chip on the shoulder, then it becomes impossible to communicate with them. It really does, because it doesn't matter what you say. For example, in this sort of dynamic, and I'm not saying, by the way, every feminist is like that, but too many are. If a man tries to be, use softer tones and so on because he doesn't want to be accused of bullying, then he's accused of patronizing. So no matter what he does, if he talks to her the way he would robustly talk to a man, oh, that's bullying. You can't talk to a woman like that. If he tries for a gentler tone, that's patronizing. So how about just having a person to person debate? You know, I think when you start to frame everything around sex or race, it just becomes impossible. Impossible. That's why I try to avoid it. It's not that I'm running away from it. It's not that I don't have confidence in my own views, but I would avoid debate with feminists unless it's necessary. I mean, it's just not something that I want to really get into unless I know that they're going to be open-minded enough not to just shun me out, you know? Um, because I've experienced this. I've been in debates with feminists where my positions have been totally distorted, totally distorted. And when you get some of the vernacular that's going on nowadays, mansplaining being an example, how do you expect men to? It just becomes impossible. So, final few words. I don't want this video to be interpreted as like an angry, masculist, denouncing feminism. I actually support the principles of feminism, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of brave feminists in this world, brave women who really do stand up to patriarchy, particularly under theocratic states in Iran, in Pakistan, and elsewhere. I have enormous respect for those women. And I think that brutality against women, we see some parts of the world, for example, femicide is a real problem. In parts of Latin America and in Africa, women are literally used as kind of war booty. It's barbaric. So unquestionably, women's rights are human rights. That's why every International Women's Day, I make some sort of post about that, positive post, because I do believe in it. I also believe in International Men's Day. So all I'm saying is let's not make this constantly about men versus women. Feminists say that they're not an anti-male movement. Okay, I would concede many feminists aren't. I think many individual feminists, they'll say we have fathers, we have brothers, we have husbands, we have boyfriends, male friends. But I think they also have to acknowledge that there is misandry within feminism. There is. And I've always taken this view that if you associate yourself with an ideology or a movement and you do not condemn the extremes in its midst, you cannot complain about a negative perception to the movement as a whole. If I associate myself with a political party and an MP in that party does something inexcusable, I'm not going to defend him or her just because they're wearing my colours. There has to be honesty. And if feminists just step back a little bit now and again and said, okay, fair enough, there are some women who have this attitude, I think they'll find that men are a lot more, for want of a better term, open minded to meeting them halfway. But as it stands, men are just put off. No one likes to be shamed. So if you're approaching a debate with, because you're a man, because I'm a woman, it's just finished. Where do you go from there? I'd particularly like to hear from female viewers on this one. What's your thoughts? Thanks for watching.